So it's really popular to hate on the Sam Raimi film Spider-Man 3. But I love the film. In fact, I loved it so much that I used it as the basis of one of the lessons that I taught back when I was a Sunday school teacher. And let me tell you the reasons why I think Spider-Man 3 is a really good film. The religious themes and overtones in Spider-Man 3 are just undeniable. And I thought it was just an excellent opportunity to make Christian themes relevant to teenagers. So let's talk about how all those Christian themes run throughout all of Spider-Man 3. So the first and most important thing to talk about is how man is flawed and vulnerable to being manipulated by evil. In fact, this theme is most effectively demonstrated by Peter Parker himself. And you might think, well, how can this be? After all, Peter Parker is the hero and he selflessly defends the people of New York. But Peter Parker has a major flaw, and that is vanity. And Parker revels in the spotlight that Spider-Man gives him. So much so that he's completely oblivious to the fact that Mary Jane's professional career is just being turned upside down. So when he's being honored by the city for saving the life of Captain Stacy's daughter Gwen, he calls on Gwen to give him the kiss that he and Mary Jane shared in the first movie, and it's a kiss that makes for a good photo op, but he doesn't realize that he's hurting Mary Jane in the process. But vanity is not his only failing. In this film, Peter Parker is also motivated by a sense of vengeance. In this film, Parker and Aunt May are called down to Captain Stacy's office to learn that Spider-Man did not kill Uncle Ben's killer in the first movie, but instead that the real killer was Flint Marko, the Sandman. And it's this vanity and vengeance that opens Peter Parker's heart up to be corrupted. And this corruption is symbolized by this dark, ugly, otherworldly thing, which turns out to be the symbiont. When this evil takes over Peter Parker's heart, he begins to change his behavior. He becomes more angry. He becomes more aggressive. This is most obvious when Parker faces the Sandman in the second battle and is much more violent and aggressive with the Sandman to the extent that Spider-Man actually has the intent to kill. Now, as a flawed human, Spider-Man can't save himself. He has to turn to God, and that is symbolized by the fact that he receives his redemption in a church steeple. The symbiont is vulnerable to loud sounds, and Peter is only able to escape from it with the help of the church bell, which symbolizes the word of God ringing out. Another flawed human who is vulnerable to being manipulated by evil is the Sandman, Flint Marko. Now, Flint Marko is not inherently a bad man. His intentions are to save his sick daughter, but he acts out of sloth, and by sloth, what I mean is that he takes the easy way out. Instead of getting a job and getting health insurance and earning money to help his daughter, he turns to a life of crime. And it's through this life of crime that he has hurt Peter and Aunt May by killing Uncle Ben. He tries to say to Peter that he had no choice, but Peter rightfully says right back to him, no, everyone has a choice. Because Marko could have chosen the right path, which was to earn money by work instead of by stealing it through crime. And that brings us to the next set of Christian themes through Spider-Man 3, and that is the themes of forgiveness. Human beings, as sinful creatures, obviously need to be forgiven. But just as important is the need to forgive others, because those who hold on to a grudge will find that a darkness takes over their heart and influences the way they behave towards other people. In fact, one of the most difficult lessons that Christ teaches us is to love our enemies and forgive those who have hurt us. Almost every major character in Spider-Man 3 needs not only to be forgiven, but also to learn to forgive someone else. And let's start with Peter Parker. Peter Parker needs to be forgiven by, first of all, Mary Jane, whom he has hurt not only by neglecting her in the beginning of the film, but also by bringing Gwen Stacy to her work and trying to steal the show when Mary Jane is working as a singing waitress. Peter also needs to be forgiven by Harry, because Harry believes that Peter has killed his father and Also because once darkness has taken over Peter's heart, Peter has become much more aggressive in fighting Harry, so much so that he even scars Harry for life as a result of their battle. Peter also needs forgiveness from Eddie Brock. While it is true that Eddie is the one who engaged in fraud in order to get the job with the Daily Bugle, Peter takes a lot of joy in ratting Eddie out, watching Eddie lose his job, and seeing Eddie's world crumble around him. And of course, Peter needs to seek forgiveness from the Sandman, against whom he has become unnecessarily more aggressive. Peter needs to forgive Mary Jane, who has cut off communication with him without telling him what the problem is. He also needs to forgive Harry, as well as Eddie Brock, whom he does when he tries to rescue Brock from the symbiote. Finally, Peter needs to forgive Flint Marko, the Sandman, who has not killed Uncle Ben intentionally, but did so accidentally. In fact, this forgiveness comes at the end of the final battle, where now Peter and Flint can move on with their lives. Next, we need to move on to Mary Jane. Now, Mary Jane needs to be forgiven by Peter. Now, it's true that Peter was mostly at fault for their relationship, but Mary Jane did close herself off instead of talking the issues over with Peter. Mary Jane needs to forgive, obviously, Peter, as well as Harry for including her in his plot of revenge and making her hurt Peter in the process. Harry needs to be forgiven, of course, by Peter, as well as by Mary Jane, and needs to forgive Peter if he and Peter are going to save the woman they both love, Mary Jane. Moving on to Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock needs to be forgiven by Peter, which of course happens as Peter tries to save Eddie Brock from the symbiote. But he also needs to forgive Peter. And this is a much more difficult task, as we have seen Eddie literally ask God to kill Peter, which opened his heart up to darkness and allowed the symbiote to come in order for Eddie to be able to go on his campaign of revenge. In fact, Eddie is the only of the main characters who never learns to forgive. And this culminates in Eddie Brock trying to rejoin with the symbiote, just as Peter is trying to destroy it with one of Harry's bombs, resulting in Eddie going up in flames with the symbiote, just as a tortured soul is forever burned in the fires of hell. So yeah, the film gets silly at times. The whole Garth Brooks, Peter going goth thing, dancing in the streets like that, yeah, that was ridiculous. It could have been cut out and taken nothing away from the rest of the film. But I do think that much of the harsh criticism against the film has been unwarranted. I do think that the film is an excellent portrayal of Christian themes that promote values such as compassion, love, and forgiveness, and does it in an entertaining way that makes these values accessible to an older teenage audience. My name's Bill Kovatch. I'm the creator and primary contributor to the dantooinefreepress. So I'm fighting cancer and I'm also disabled. If you feel generous enough to make a small one-time donation, you can do so through PayPal. I'll have instructions in the description below. A non-tax deductible donation will go to a special needs trust set up for my benefit that will help pay my expenses. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to our channel and give us a like. Let us know in the comments below what topics you would like to see in the future. And hit that bell button if you would like to receive notification of whenever we release a new video.